The American dream isn't dead. It's just buried under a mountain of HOA regulations. I never planned to become a suburban revolutionary. 5 years ago, my wife Delina and I were just another young couple scrolling through real estate listings, dreaming of a place to call our own. Oak Ridge Estates looked like everything we'd ever wanted. Tree-lined streets, immaculate sidewalks, houses that looked like they'd been plucked from a home decor magazine and carefully arranged by an obsessive-compulsive interior designer. The marketing materials were a masterpiece of suburban propaganda. Exclusive community, the brochure proclaimed in gold-embossed lettering, where perfection meets precision. Looking back, those words should have been my first warning. Our realtor, Melissa Rodriguez, was a whirlwind of enthusiasm. "You'll love Oak Ridge," she'd said, her perfectly manicured nails tapping the glossy brochure. It's consistently rated as the most well-maintained neighborhood in the county. What she didn't mention was the price of that maintenance, a price that went far beyond the monthly HOA fees. The community seemed like a dream when we first moved in. Everything was immaculate. Lawns looked like they'd been measured with laser precision. Not a single blade of grass dared to stick out of line. Mailboxes stood at attention, their black numbers perfectly aligned, their posts painted in a uniform shade that the HOA handbook referred to as Oak Ridge charcoal, because, apparently, even mailbox colors required corporate-level branding. Harrison Whitmore IE embodied the spirit of Oak Ridge Estates, a retired middle manager with nothing but time and an inexhaustible supply of bureaucratic energy. He'd been the HOA president for the past 12 years. Everything about him screamed middle management, from his pressed khakis to his wire-rimmed glasses that seemed perpetually perched on the end of his nose, ready to inspect any potential violation. His wife, Linda, was the HOA secretary, a role she took more seriously than most people take life-saving surgery. She maintained records with the precision of a forensic accountant and the ruthlessness of a medieval tax collector. Together, they were the monarchy of Oak Ridge, ruling their suburban kingdom with clipboards and fine notices. Our first encounter came during the welcome package walkthrough. Harrison and Linda invited all new residents to a mandatory orientation, and when they say mandatory, they mean it. Miss the meeting, and you'd be slapped with a $250 non-attendance fee, faster than you could say community bylaws. The handbook is 147 pages long, Harrison explained, his voice a monotone that suggested he'd given this speech hundreds of times. But it can be summarized in one simple rule. Oak Ridge is not just a neighborhood. It's a lifestyle. I should have run then, but the beautiful craftsman-style house, the promise of community, the dream we'd saved for, it all seemed worth it. Our first warning came 3 weeks after moving in. A certified letter arrived, precise and clinical, citing a violation for my welcome mat. Apparently, the mat's welcome home message was 0.5 inches too large for the approved entranced decor zone. The fine? $50. Elena laughed when she saw it. "Is this real?" she asked, her background and intelligence analysis kicking in. She began examining the letter with the same intensity she'd once used to dissect international intelligence reports. What we didn't know then was that this was just the beginning. Oak Ridge Estates wasn't just a neighborhood. It was a bureaucratic battleground, and we had just become its newest combatants. The welcome mat was our first hint. The war was about to begin. The fines came like a death by 1,000 cuts. Our first HOA meeting was nothing short of a bureaucratic nightmare. The community center, a sterile beige building that looked like it had been designed by someone who hated joy, was packed with residents who seemed equally parts terrified and resigned. Harrison Whitmore presided over the meeting like a small-town dictator, his voice cutting through the room with the precision of a laser-guided missile. "New business," he announced, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. Resolution 247B regarding non-standard exterior decorations. I raised my hand. "Can you clarify what constitutes a non-standard decoration?" Linda Whitmore, perched next to her husband like a particularly judgmental bird, flipped through a massive binder. "Anything not pre-approved by the Architectural Review Committee," she said, her tone suggesting I was an idiot for even asking. The list of prohibited items was mind-boggling. Wind chimes, banned, yard sculptures, prohibited. Even the type of welcome mat was regulated with a specificity that would make most government bureaucracies look relaxed. "Your welcome mat," Harrison said, pulling out a measuring tape, "exceeds the approved dimensional guidelines by 0.5 inches. That's a $50 fine." I couldn't believe my ears. $50 for half an inch. "Rules are rules, Mr. Reyes," he responded, his voice as dry as week-old toast. "If we make exceptions for you, we'd have to make exceptions for everyone." My neighbor, Sarah Thompson, a retired school teacher with fire in her eyes, leaned over. "Welcome to Oak Ridge," she whispered. "They've been like this for years, but nobody's ever stood up to them." The fine started small but grew exponentially. $50 for the welcome mat violation, $75 for a garbage can position 2 inches outside the designated storage area, $100 for potted plants on the front porch that weren't in the approved terracotta color range. Each fine came with a clinical, emotionless letter. No room for discussion, no opportunity for appeal. Alina, my wife, began documenting everything. Her background in intelligence analysis meant she approached these notices like classified intelligence reports. She created spreadsheets, took photographs, measured distances with laser-like precision. "This isn't normal," she told me one evening, spreading out the HOA documentation across our dining room table. "These fines are systematic. They're designed to generate revenue, not maintain community standards." When I tried to appeal the first set of fines at the next monthly meeting, Harrison cut me off mid-sentence. "The bylaws are clear, Mr. Reyes," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Section 4, Paragraph 7 clearly states that all exterior decorations must conform to the Oak Ridge Aesthetic Guidelines." I discovered later that the Oak Ridge Aesthetic Guidelines was a 147-page document that seemed to have been written by someone with both too much time and a fundamental hatred of individual expression. Our next-door neighbors, the Garcia family, were experiencing similar harassment. Maria Garcia showed me a stack of fines that had already reached $3,000, punishments for everything from the color of their window shutters to the height of their mailbox. "We're afraid to do anything," Maria confided. "One wrong move, and they'll fine us into bankruptcy." It was becoming clear that Oak Ridge Estates wasn't a community. It was a financial extraction machine, designed to squeeze every possible dollar from its residents under the guise of maintaining property values. Little did Harrison Whitmore know, he was about to meet someone who didn't scare easily. Someone who would fight back with the same meticulous strategy he used to oppress the neighborhood. The war was just beginning. Summer in Oak Ridge Estates was like living inside a pressure cooker of passive-aggressive regulations. The HOA's latest assault came in the form of Resolution 279, a document so comprehensive it might as well have been a manual for total neighborhood domination. Harrison Whitmore introduced it during the July meeting with the enthusiasm of a general launching a military campaign. "Effective immediately," he announced, his voice cutting through the muggy community center air. "All exterior modifications must be pre-approved by the Architectural Review Committee, and I mean everything." The new resolution was a masterpiece of bureaucratic overreach. Want to plant a tree? Submit a 17-page application with botanical specifications, soil analysis, and a detailed growth projection. Thinking about repainting your front door? You'd need color swatches, paint brand information, and a signed affidavit confirming the color's compliance with the Oak Ridge Chromatic Harmony Guidelines. Maria Garcia was the first to feel the full force of the new resolution. Her son's birthday party became a regulatory nightmare. A simple bounce house, set up with all the proper permissions and only for a few hours, resulted in a $500 temporary structure violation fine. They're claiming the bounce house was 0.3 inches taller than the maximum allowed height, Maria told me, her voice trembling with frustration. Who measures a bounce house to the 1/10 of an inch? The neighborhood was a powder keg of resentment, and everyone knew it. Yet fear kept most residents silent. Harrison and Linda Whitmore had cultivated a climate of terror so effective that neighbors would rather pay outrageous fines than speak up. Our own battles escalated quickly, a fine for my garbage cans being 2 inches outside the designated storage area, another for my grass being 0.25 inches too long. When I missed a mandatory HOA meeting due to a work commitment, they slapped me with a $250 non-attendance penalty. Alina's investigative skills went into overdrive. She began mapping out the HOA's fine patterns, discovering something disturbing. The fines weren't random. They were systematically targeting specific homeowners. "Look at this," she said one evening, spreading out a complex spreadsheet. "The Garcias, the Thompsons, us. We are all recent newcomers to the neighborhood, the longtime residents. They get almost no fines at all. Our neighbor Sarah Thompson, the retired school teacher who become our unlikely ally, confirmed our suspicions. It's a protection racket," she said bluntly. "The old-timers are in on it. They get a pass, while newcomers get squeezed." The breaking point came during the August HOA meeting. Harrison introduced yet another regulation, this time dictating the exact shade of exterior house colors. All homes must be within a microscopic range of oak ridge beige, a color so bland it made government buildings look exciting. "This is insane," I muttered loud enough for others to hear. Harrison's eyes locked onto me. "Is there a problem, Mr. Reyes?" I stood up. "Actually, yes. These regulations are ridiculous. They're not about maintaining property values. They're about control." A hushed silence fell over the room. You could hear a pin drop, or in Oak Ridge Estates, a pin that was precisely 2.5 inches long and made of HOA-approved aluminum. Sarah Thompson stood up beside me. "He's right," she declared. "This has gone too far." Something was changing in the room. The looks of fear were slowly transforming into something else, something that looked a lot like rebellion. Harrison Whitmore's face turned an interesting shade of purple. For the first time, I saw a crack in his perfectly maintained facade. The war was about to get serious. The foreclosure notice arrived on a Tuesday. Not for missed mortgage payments, not for any legitimate financial reason. No, this was a foreclosure threat based entirely on accumulated HOA fines and repeated violations that would make Kafka look like an optimist. The total amount, $12,375. Let that sink in. $12,375. For infractions that included welcome mat size violation, $50. Garbage can placement, $75. Grass height discrepancy, $100. Missed HOA meeting, $250. Unauthorized potted plant color, $100. Mailbox angle deviation, $75. And dozens more equally absurd citations. Alina spread the documents across our dining room table, her intelligence analyst brain going into overdrive. "This isn't just harassment," she said, her voice cold and calculating. "This is systematic financial warfare." The breakdown was terrifying in its precision. Each fine was meticulously documented, with measurements that would make a quantum physicist proud. A mailbox 0.3 degrees off-center. That'll be $75, please. A welcome mat 0.5 inches wider than regulation. Another fine. Harrison Whitmore had transformed from a neighborhood bureaucrat into something far more sinister. A predatory financial parasite feeding on homeowner desperation. We weren't alone. The Garcias had received similar notices, so had 3 other families on our street, all recent newcomers, all targeted with a precision that felt anything but random. "They're trying to push us out," Maria Garcia told me during an emergency neighborhood meeting we'd organized in secret. But why? The answer came from an unexpected source. Sarah Thompson, our retired school teacher neighbor, had been digging, and what she discovered was far more disturbing than mere bureaucratic overreach. "It's about property values," she explained, spreading out a series of documents she painstakingly collected, "but not in the way you might think. These fines, they're a mechanism to force out certain homeowners." The pattern was clear. Families of color, young professionals, Anyone who didn't fit the original Oak Ridge demographic, the fines were a weapon, a way to financially pressure outsiders into selling their homes. Our total fine amount was just the beginning. If we didn't pay, they could indeed initiate foreclosure proceedings. The HOA bylaws, a 147-page document that read like a combination of legal thriller and dystopian rulebook, gave them surprising power. We need a plan, Elena said, her CIA training kicking into high gear, and not just a defensive one. We need to go on the offensive. I looked at the foreclosure notice, at the pages of ridiculous fines, at the systematic targeting of our neighborhood. Something inside me broke, not in defeat, but in determination. Harrison Whitmore and his HOA thought they were untouchable. They believed their clipboards and fine notices made them invincible. They had no idea what was coming. Time to fight back, I said, a plan already forming in my mind. Elena smiled, the same smile I'd seen her use when briefing special ops teams. Let's make them regret the day they ever messed with us. The foreclosure notice wasn't the end of our story. It was just the beginning of their nightmare. Data is a weapon, and I was about to wage war with a spreadsheet. My background in software engineering wasn't just about writing code. It was about finding patterns, uncovering hidden connections, and exposing the truth. Elena's CIA training had taught me that intelligence isn't just about gathering information. It's about turning that information into a strategic advantage. We began our counteroffensive with surgical precision. Every single HOA document, every fine, every meeting minutes, every regulation, we digitized, categorized, and analyzed them with the intensity of a forensic investigation. What emerged was nothing short of a systematic blueprint of corruption. The first breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Linda Whitmore, Harrison's wife and HOA secretary, had been meticulous in her record keeping. Too meticulous. Her obsessive documentation became our greatest weapon. Look at this, Elena said one night, her fingers flying across the keyboard. The fine amounts aren't consistent. They're incrementally increasing for specific homeowners. We discovered a disturbing pattern. Newer residents, particularly families of color or those who didn't fit the original Oak Ridge demographic, were being hit with progressively higher fines. The Garcias, the Thompsons, us, it wasn't random. It was deliberate. I connected with James Martinez, a local civil rights attorney who specialized in housing discrimination. When I presented our meticulously compiled evidence, his eyes widened. This is textbook systemic harassment, he said, reviewing our documentation. We're looking at potential violations of the Fair Housing Act, potential discrimination claims, and multiple state-level housing regulations. Our strategy was multi-pronged. 1. Document everything. 2. Gather community support. 3. Prepare legal action. 4. Expose the HOA's practices. Sarah Thompson became our unexpected ally. A retired school teacher with a razor-sharp mind and zero tolerance for injustice, she began reaching out to other homeowners. Many were afraid, but some were ready to fight. We discovered that HOA had been operating with near-total impunity for years. Fabricated fines, selective enforcement, financial manipulation that would make corporate fraudsters blush. The most shocking revelation came from financial records. The HOA wasn't just issuing fines. They were using those fines to funnel money into mysterious community improvement accounts that seemed to have no actual improvements to show for them. They're running a protection racket, Elena concluded after our analysis. Longtime residents get a pass. Newcomers get squeezed. Our first major move was strategic. We filed a formal complaint with multiple agencies: State Housing Authority, Fair Housing Commission, Local Consumer Protection Bureau, County Legal Services. Each complaint was backed by hundreds of pages of meticulously documented evidence, spreadsheets, photographs, comparative analyses. We left nothing to chance. Harrison Whitmore had no idea what was coming. The community began to shift. Whispers of support turned into conversations. Conversations turned into collective action. The fear that had paralyzed Oak Ridge Estates for years was slowly being replaced by something else: hope and righteous anger. They thought we'd be easy targets. I told Elena one evening. They had no idea what they were starting. She smiled, that dangerous smile I'd seen her use during briefings that changed international politics. They're about to find out. The fight was just beginning, and we were ready. The first crack in the HOA's armor came from within. Robert Chen, the youngest board member, was the first to break ranks. A local software engineer in his mid-30s, he'd been quietly observing the HOA's practices for years. Our meticulously compiled evidence was the final straw. I can't be part of this anymore, he told us during a clandestine meeting at a coffee shop 2 towns over. His hands shook slightly as he slid a USB drive across the table. I've been collecting my own documentation. Ken's information was a goldmine. Internal emails, financial records, detailed logs of selective enforcement that went back nearly a decade. What we'd suspected was true. The HOA wasn't just corrupt. It was a carefully orchestrated machine designed to maintain a specific demographic and generate unauthorized revenue. Linda Whitmore, Harrison's wife and the HOA's secretary, was the next domino to fall. Whether it was guilt, fear, or a desire to save herself, she began to cooperate. The information she provided was devastating. Harrison thought he was untouchable. She confided during her first meeting with our legal team. He's been doing this for years. The fines, the selective enforcement, it was all calculated. The local media caught wind of our investigation. Sarah Thompson, with her network of retired teachers and community activists, ensured the story gained traction. What started as a neighborhood dispute was becoming a full-blown expose. Local news stations began investigating. Investigative reporters started digging into the HOA's practices. Suddenly, Oak Ridge Estates was under a microscope. The board meetings became a battlefield. Where once Harrison Whitmore had ruled with an iron clipboard, now dissent was brewing. 2 more board members approached us privately, providing additional evidence of misconduct. Our legal strategy was multi-pronged. File discrimination complaints, challenge the HOA's financial practices, expose the pattern of selective enforcement, seek damages for targeted homeowners. James Martinez, our civil rights attorney, was a strategic genius. Each piece of evidence was carefully placed, each legal motion calculated for maximum impact. We're not just fighting a homeowners association, he explained. We're exposing a system of institutional discrimination. The evidence was compelling. 78% of fines issued to non-white homeowners, consistent targeting of newcomers, fabricated violations, misappropriation of HOA funds, violation of multiple state housing regulations. Harrison Whitmore's perfect world was crumbling. The HOA meetings, once his personal kingdom, became battlegrounds of accusations and revelations. This is unprecedented, Robert Chen told me, his voice a mix of excitement and fear. We're actually going to take them down. The community was transforming. Neighbors who had lived in fear for years were now sharing stories, comparing notes, building a collective case. The Garcias, the Thompsons, our family. We were no longer isolated targets. We were a united front. Elena's intelligence training proved invaluable. She coordinated our efforts like a military operation, ensuring every piece of evidence was preserved, every legal avenue explored. They thought we'd be easy targets, she said one evening, reviewing our growing file of documentation. They had no idea what they were starting. Harrison Whitmore was about to learn a painful lesson. In the age of data and digital documentation, corruption has nowhere to hide. The HOA's downfall wasn't just coming, it was inevitable. The courtroom was packed, standing room only. What had started as a neighborhood dispute had transformed into a landmark case that would be studied in housing law classes for years to come. Harrison Whitmore sat at the defendant's table, his once immaculate appearance now disheveled, his silver hair noticeably thinner than when this whole ordeal began. Our legal team, led by James Martinez, presented a case so meticulously documented that it read like a forensic takedown of an organized crime operation. Each piece of evidence was a precisely placed dagger into the heart of the HOA's corrupt system. The evidence was overwhelming. Systematic discrimination against non-white homeowners, fabricated violations designed to generate revenue, misappropriation of HOA funds, violation of multiple state and federal housing regulations, intentional harassment of newcomers to the neighborhood. Robert Chen, the whistleblower board member, took the stand first. His testimony was a bomb that exploded the HOA's carefully constructed facade. It was never about maintaining property values, he testified, his voice steady despite the pressure. It was about controlling who could and couldn't live in Oak Ridge Estates. Linda Whitmore, Harrison's own wife, became the prosecution's star witness. Her testimony was a knife twist that left the courtroom in stunned silence. The fines were never random, she said, her voice breaking. We had spreadsheets, algorithms, ways to target specific homeowners and push them out. The financial records told a damning story. Millions of dollars in unexplained community improvement funds, selective enforcement that generated hundreds of thousands in fines, a systematic approach to neighborhood management that was nothing short of institutional racism. Our neighborhood had transformed during the investigation. What was once a community paralyzed by fear was now united. The Garcias, the Thompsons, dozens of other families, we sat together, a united front against years of oppression. Alina's intelligence work had been crucial. Her ability to connect dots, to find patterns invisible to others, had turned our case from a local dispute into a national conversation about housing discrimination. This isn't just about Oak Ridge Estates, James Martinez told the packed courtroom. This is about every community where power has been used to marginalize and control. Harrison Whitmore's defense was weak and desperate. Attempts to claim administrative error fell apart under the weight of our documentation. Every excuse crumbled, every justification exposed as a lie. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with eyes that seemed to look through people rather than at them, listened intently. Her questions were surgical, cutting through legal rhetoric to the heart of the matter. Mr. Whitmore, she said at one point, are you suggesting that these patterns of discrimination were mere coincidence? His silence was more damning than any words could have been. As the trial progressed, media coverage exploded. What had started as a local HOA dispute was now a national story about systemic discrimination, abuse of power, and community resistance. We never wanted to be heroes, I told a reporter during a break. We just wanted to live in our home without being harassed. Alina squeezed my hand. The look in her eyes said everything. This was about more than just our neighborhood. This was about justice. The final day of the trial approached. The verdict was coming, and everyone knew nothing would be the same after this. Harrison Whitmore's reign was about to end. The verdict came down like a hammer of justice. Total dismantlement, complete and absolute. The judge's ruling was unprecedented. Not only was the entire Oak Ridge Estates HOA board disbanded, but they were also permanently barred from serving on any homeowners association in the state. Harrison and Linda Whitmore were ordered to pay substantial financial restitution to the homeowners they had systematically harassed. But it wasn't just about punishment. It was about rebuilding. The court mandated a complete restructuring of the neighborhood's governance. A new democratically elected board would be formed, with strict guidelines to prevent the kind of systematic discrimination we had exposed, diversity requirements, transparent financial reporting, independent audits. Our legal victory came with more than just financial compensation. Every fine was reversed. Every homeowner who had been targeted received full reimbursement, plus damages. This is about more than money, James Martinez told us after the ruling. This is about sending a message to every HOA in the country. The media coverage was relentless. National news outlets picked up the story. What had started as our neighborhood's fight had become a national conversation about housing discrimination, community power, and systemic racism. Robert Chen, the whistleblower board member, became an unexpected hero. Speaking engagements, interviews, a book deal about institutional corruption. Our neighborhood began to heal. The fear that had defined Oak Ridge Estates for years was replaced by something else: hope, community, real connection. The first new HOA meeting was held on our front lawn, with my original oversized welcome mat proudly displayed. Neighbors who had once been afraid to speak now spoke freely. We created bylaws together. We defined community standards as a collective. Elena found the whole process fascinating. Intelligence work is about understanding systems, she told me, breaking them, rebuilding them. The Garcias, the Thompsons, our family. We weren't just neighbors anymore. We were a united community that had fought back and won. Harrison Whitmore's final act of desperation came months later, a desperate appeal, a last-minute attempt to salvage something from the wreckage of his reputation. It failed spectacularly. Some might call this revenge. I told a local reporter. I call it justice. The financial impact was significant. The Whitmores lost everything. Their home, their reputation, their entire way of life. They became a cautionary tale, a warning about the dangers of institutional discrimination. Our neighborhood became something special, a model of what community could be: diverse, inclusive, supportive. Sarah Thompson, our retired teacher neighbor who had been instrumental in our fight, put it best. We didn't just win a legal battle. We rebuilt our community. The welcome mat that had started our entire journey, the one that was 0.5 inches too large, now hung in our local community center. A reminder of how small acts of resistance can create massive change. Elena and I would look at each other sometimes, remembering how it all began. A simple welcome mat, a ridiculous fine, a community's worth of determination. We never wanted to be heroes, I'd say. She'd just smile, that dangerous, knowing smile. We just wanted to live in our home. Asterisk epilogue asterisk. They say never mess with someone who knows how to use a spreadsheet and isn't afraid to fight. Lesson learned, Harrison. Lesson learned.